So our crust just came out of the oven. At this point, in your home, you should be getting hit with wave after wave of chocolatey goodness, all right? I mean, this stuff smells absolutely incredible. But this is gonna be super easy. Some very important things you need to keep in mind when you're cooking any type of custard dish, because cheesecake is pretty much an egg custard. One, you don't wanna overmix once you put the eggs in. Two, you wanna make sure that as much of your ingredients as possible is at room temperature. If you use something like pumpkin, make sure it's at room temperature. The cream cheese at room temperature, the eggs at room temperature. Make sure you let the pan cool completely, because when we put this in the oven, there's something we need to be mindful of. We'll get back to that though. The first thing we're gonna do, of course, is wash our hands and gather all of our ingredients. For the filling to the cheesecake, you're gonna need a couple things. You'll need non-stick spray, you'll need 5 eggs, you'll need 15 ounces of pureed pumpkin, you'll need 32 ounces or 4 8-ounce packages of cream cheese. Brand definitely matters if you ask me. You'll need 1 cup of granulated white sugar, 1½ teaspoons of your favorite pumpkin spice, and 1½ teaspoons of your favorite vanilla. We're gonna use our paddle attachment because if we use the whisk attachment, it's gonna overwork the eggs once we decide to put them in. But we're gonna toss in our cream cheese and we're gonna let that work until it's nice and loose and whipped. And I've seen people try to use pre-whipped cream cheese. Don't do that to yourself. That's a mistake. Right off the bat, I'm telling you. So we'll drop that down, make sure we lock it in place, and we'll start it at a number 2 in your mixer. And we're gonna let that go for a minute. We wanna get that nice and loose, and if it's not exactly at room temperature, this is gonna work it out the rest of the way. So we're gonna let that go for about 60 or 120 seconds. While we let that work, we're gonna make sure our oven's on 325 degrees, and we're gonna get a small saucepan on the stove with about 1.5 quarts of water, and we're gonna boil it. When we pull this up and get this off the side, we're gonna make sure that everything gets mixed up and gets a chance to get whipped up in there. And it's also gonna give us a chance to see what the consistency is like as we drag the spatula through. We're gonna put that back on for a second because I think it needs a little more work. And after it goes for about another 30 seconds, I'm gonna start adding this cup of sugar. So our sugar and cream cheese has gotten mixed up. We're gonna work the sides down and add our 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla and our 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin spice. We happen to get our pumpkin spice this time from a market we saw in New York, but usually any other time, I definitely always hit up the Saturday morning market in Charlottesville. I mean, places like Bel Air Farms with produce, Caramel Farms for the goat cheese, the taco stand, Carpe Donut, come on, the original apple cider donut will knock your socks off. Anyway, we're gonna work the sides down on this, and we're gonna add our 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla and our 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin spice, along with our 15 ounces of pumpkin. 15 ounces of pumpkin, 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla, 1.5 teaspoons of pumpkin spice. We're gonna drop this back down and let this get nice and worked in. We're gonna add our eggs last, of course, because we don't wanna overwork the eggs. The more we overwork the eggs, the drier they'll become when we bake it in the oven, and that's what we're gonna try to avoid. So we're getting that incorporated in. We're gonna work the sides down at least once when we're mixing in everything before we start adding our eggs. So here's what we'll do. We're gonna put this on speed number 2, and we'll add these eggs one at a time. And as soon as that last one goes in, after about 10 seconds, we're gonna take it out right away and put it in our pan. So we're gonna make sure that our pan's ready to go, fully cooled down, and I'm gonna give it another quick spray around the top edge to make sure that our custard doesn't stick while it's baking. At this point, before you add the eggs, go ahead and grab you a casserole dish metal and put it on the bottom tray of your oven that's preheating at 325. You see, when we cook a custard dish, something that's made with eggs this way, it can dry out very easily. And what we wanna do when we put this cheesecake in the oven is we wanna make sure that the top of that stays hydrated. We wanna make sure that the moisture level stays high. So we've gotta create some steam in the oven so that when our egg custard rises, it doesn't stick to the side, it doesn't dry out, and it doesn't collapse when we then bring it out. And another thing, once you put this bad boy in there, do not look for at least 50 minutes. Make sure you don't overhandle it. So I'm gonna pop this bad boy in the oven so that'll be preheated because I'm gonna add my boiling water to it just before I pour this into the pan and throw it in the oven. Lock it down, put it on number 2. Last eggs in, we'll give it about 10 seconds. We'll turn that off. Pull this bad boy off, give it a quick scrape down, and it might seem like it's got a little bit left in it. But trust me, once you fold this over and get the edges, it'll be enough. So pull your paddle away, and maybe this isn't necessary, but this is something I like to do. But get one more time way down in there, get a nice fold 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and get around that edge, and then go right into your cheesecake pan. We're just gonna give this a little shake. And in typical situations, people like to use what's known as a bain-marie. And that's where you actually wrap this in foil and submerge it in about 1 inch of water and bake it at about 325 degrees. And that's what they use to make sure that the top of it stays hydrated so that it doesn't crack. You can achieve the same results we find by just taking your pan in the bottom like we've got preheating and adding boiling water just before you add this in. So we're gonna let this settle for just a second. We're gonna add our boiling water into our pan in the oven, and then we're gonna go from there. Now that we put in a little messy work on our KitchenAid, we've got our cheesecake poured out. We've got our roasting pan in the bottom shelf of our oven with the boiling water in it to create steam while we cook our cheesecake. That's gonna give it a nice even lift. It's gonna collapse a lot less, and it's gonna pull away from the edges of the pan. So we're gonna pop this in and shut the door at it at 325 degrees, and we're not even gonna peek for at least 50 minutes, right? Right. Don't forget to set a timer.